Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tony Bergantino. I'm the acting director of the Wyoming State Climate Office and the Water Resources Data System. Thank you for joining us for the first Wyoming Conditions and Outlooks webinar of 2022. This webinar is presented this month by my office, along with the University of Wyoming Extension, the USDA Northern Plains Climate Hub, US Geological Survey, Colorado Basin River Forecast Center, and the National Weather Service. As before, this update will look at current conditions, snowpack, followed by current water status, weather forecasts and outlooks, and we'll finish up with how you can participate and help us in the drought monitoring process. So, looking at current conditions here, this is the current Drought Monitor Map. This is a weekly product that is updated for each Tuesday and is released on Thursday morning. This one here was just released this morning. The areas circled in green show where we've had some improvements since our last webinar. A lot of these are from some snowpack that has started to build recently, or in some cases a little bit further back when some of these changes were made, which resulted in quite a bit of removal of extreme drought up here in the northwest, and some down here in the southeast as well, along with getting rid of some conditions that were less than ideal down here in the south central part of the state. But unfortunately, you also see some red areas here on the map, and these areas represent places where we've had some degradations from continuing precipitation deficits. So a little bit of a mix of improvement and unimprovement in the last since last we spoke. This is the 14-day precipitation as a percentile. This is from the 6th of June or 6th of January through the 19th of yesterday, and shows we've got quite a few areas here where we've had above median precipitation in the last 2 weeks, over here in the west, northwest, down here in the southeast. But at the same time, we've had some very prominent areas of where we've had precipitation deficits in the last 2 weeks as well. A large area up here in the northeast where we're running 5th percentile or less, and to a lesser extent, we're down here in south part of Sweetwater County, a little bit of that 2nd to 5th percentile in the last 2 weeks as well. And a lot of green areas, which is right around a little above the median, and then these whitish gray areas here where we're right at the median, 40th to 60th percentile. Look at this map at a 90-day time frame, and you see quite a bit of a different picture. Down here in the south central, southwest part of the state, coming up in here into Lincoln County, we're a little above the median to a little bit more above the median, where we're seeing these blues and even some of these purples. But the northern 2/3 roughly of the state, we're either at median or below. And you can see this area over here in Black Hills where I've got quite a bit of the 5th percentile or less showing up, as well as on the western flanks of the Wind River Range. This is the standardized precipitation index. Those who are new today, this is a product that looks at precipitation totals over various time intervals, going back several months and years even, whether it is, look at every January for the last 100 years, or every November through January, or pick whatever interval you're interested in. And these precipitation totals are then fit into a normal distribution. And based on that distribution, we can see how far away from the median the past, say, 30 days have been. And the nice capability of the SPI is when looking at that distance from the median, you can see just sort of what category of drought you're in, since the drought categories are based on percentiles. So, for example, we look to see on average conditions corresponding to D3 or extreme drought occurring about once every 20 to 50 years. So if you can see how far away from the median you are, you have a little bit of a key based on precipitation of what your drought category is. And obviously there are other factors involved. You look at soil moisture and other parameters, but this lets you look at one of the big ones, which is the precipitation. And these maps here show 30, 60-day values, along with the 1 year down here in the lower right. And you can see some emerging areas where you have some improvement coming in. You can see here at the 60-day, the area here is starting to get a little dark blue, but when you look here in the last 30 days, it's a lot deeper blue, indicating much wetter conditions. At the same time, we have this area up here in the northeast where we're getting some pretty distinct reds, indicating some pretty strong dryness starting to emerge here in the last 30 days. When you look over here at 60, you're not seeing any sign of it. And when you look back a year, you're seeing you're seeing longer term deficits over here, which are kind of unrelated to this emerging spot here. Switching from precipitation to temperature, these are 14-day minimum absolute temperatures. That is what the thermometer would be showing, and then the departure from the average or normal. And you can see down here on the lower left, quite a bit of the state the last 14 days was about 3 to 6 degrees above the average. Some higher elevation valley and Bighorn Basin where we're seeing some little bit of cooler departures up to 3 degrees below the average. And then a little bit over here in this region here where we're upwards of 9 degrees below average. The converse to that, though, is over here in the southeast, we've had some areas where we're up to 15 degrees above average in some of these little areas here. And then the yellow, 0 to 3, quite a bit of area here. But by and large, most of the state doing above average on temperatures for the minimum. And then looking at the absolute temperatures, you can see some of the cold spots here, the upper green here in Sublette County, and then some of these higher elevation valleys where we've got minimum temperatures averaged over the last 2 weeks, 5 degrees below normal, approaching even more of that in some areas. Looking at the maximum temperature, we're seeing somewhat the same thing down here in the lower left. These are large area here running about 6 to 9 degrees above the average. Down here in southwest part of Wyoming, the same thing. And the rest of it running 3 to 6 above average, with some of these yellower areas here just a little bit above average. Again, some of those same areas that we were seeing are on the cool spot for the maximum temperatures as well, with the addition of this little area here down in southeastern Laramie County, which is also a little bit below the average on the maximum temperatures. And looking at the absolute temperature, we're seeing that high elevations, 32 degrees or less for highs. Some pretty warm areas here off the Bighorns, relatively speaking, and off the Laramie range where we're seeing average daytime highs in the low to mid 40s. And basically cooler over here in the higher elevation and warmer here in the plains. Looking at snow water equivalent, what the snowpack's doing. This is a comparison from 2 weeks ago to this morning, and see a lot of similarities, some degradation here where we're losing snowpack here in the west and down here along the southern part of the state. But by and large, over here on the eastern side, we're holding pretty much about the same or within a few percentage points, but we are losing overall when you look at the snowpack basin wide. And that's even a little bit more obvious when you look at the modeled snow water equivalent across all elevations. You can see here 2 weeks ago, quite a bit of areas where we were about the median, a few areas here where we're in the 10th or less percentile. Some good spots over here in Goshen, Platte, Laramie County that are really have disappeared, along with all these other areas in here where we were seeing the grays and other colors were now deep in solid red. So we've lost quite a bit of snow cover in the last 2 weeks. What soil moisture has done, well, it's gotten worse as well. A few areas up here, it's improved a little bit, but by and large, we're losing ground. And it's going to continue kind of like this because with the snow cover, not letting and nothing melting, getting into where the soil is now frozen in those top couple layers, you're not going to be seeing too much going into there. So we're going to be probably holding in a pattern similar to this for a little bit now. And speaking of the soil moisture, here's at our Sheridan station. You can kind of see we're flatlined, a little bit of variation at the most shallow depth. This is about 2 inches here, this gray line. But by and large, we're running pretty flat line for what soil moisture is doing. And soil temperature, you can see a little bit of fluctuation here again in the upper depths. This line here is the 32 or freeze mark. So down to about 4 inches, a little bit more. We're frozen in Sheridan at least. And the fluctuation is a little bit more or less pronounced based on the snow cover. We're not much on the ground there, so we're getting a little bit of ebb and flow of what the snow cover is doing. So you get a little bit of warmth coming up and down. And that also is translating a little bit to the soil moisture changing. Very, very minor though when it's doing so. These maps show soil temperatures stacked by depth. These are from 2 stations in the Upper Missouri River Basin project that we have going on that I spoke about last month. These stations down here from the state engineer's office that have been equipped with multiple depth sensors to obtain a profile of conditions. And from that, at depths of 2, 4, 8, 20, and 40 inches, we're measuring both soil temperature and moisture. And on the temperature side, with those depths, we can then come up with where the frost line is. And you can see as of this morning, the frost depth that was kind of deep in some places. Down here, a little over 2 feet, Powell Station about 2 feet, and some of the others foot thereabouts. So the ground is frozen and is probably going to remain for a while. And look at some drought timelines here. The area of the state in D1 to D4 has increased a little bit compared to last month, but only about 0.5% from our last webinar. The good news is that with the overall percentage going up, we did go down on the D3 or extreme drought portion of it. So while the area in the state has gone up just a little bit, the overall extent of it, or the overall ranking of it, has gone down a bit. And that can be seen a little bit more here when you look at the last a little over 2 years. This is going back to January 1 of 2020. And you can see the area of extreme drought, or D3 here, has been going down here for the last little over a month and a half. D2 here has remained pretty much level, as have the other categories. No part of the state is in does not have a either D0 through D4 category, and it has been going on since late fall. And so with that, I will turn it over to Aaron Fiaschetti with the USGS, who's going to talk about surface water conditions.
Thank you, Tony. Yeah, just to fill in right now that as you can see here, we got a map of our current conditions in Wyoming, and you see a lot of gray there. That's because most stations aren't reporting flow values in a real-time manner right now. And that's because being that we're near the middle of winter, most sites have ice on them, and when you have ice on the river, it disrupts the stage discharge relationship, and it makes us unavailable to provide real-time stream flow data. So we don't have a lot of data to report right now, but in general, the stations that are reporting either being below a tailwater dam or somewhere high up in the mountains where there's enough gradient to keep the stream open, they generally seem near normal, which would be a low kind of winter base flow condition. You see a couple red sites in the west on the Snake River, and I believe that's the Firehole River up in the park there that's showing a low flow right now. The next slide, Tony. So this a pretty common slide I present here. It just kind of shows daily stream flow trends over the last 45 days. This is 50 sites, 50 out of our approximately 130 sites that have 30 years of record or no missing values. And it just shows general percentiles, normal 25th to 75th. The low is the 10 to 24th, and so on as you get into the reds. In the low is the bright red. So what we see here kind of in early December is things were pretty stable, not much changed, which is kind of what you would expect. That, you know, most of the gauges were in that normal stream flow range that we're reporting. We don't have any data from the end of December on, is because most of those sites aren't reporting because of ice right now. So in general, things haven't changed a whole lot since I last presented here, with that distribution of sites in normal to low and or above normal. Next slide, please. So here we are looking just at a 7-day average, which kind of gives you a little bit better picture of what's kind of going on with a current trend in stream flow. So if we look at this month compared to last month, well, it's kind of hard to say really what changed much because we have less sites reporting. But it seems like in general, what was green and normal last month in December tends to be there right now in January. Still a few sites on the Snake showing low values, and the same with the sites up in the park too. But the majority of sites, just nothing to show right now. Those records will be worked up, but that'll be kind of as time goes on, as techs go out there and take measurements and estimate that record over the winter. So just not available right now. Next slide, please, Tony. So I had to do a little bit of hunting and pecking to find a few sites that actually had data on a major river, but just looking here at the Wind River near Du Bois, just seemed like we're in a kind of, since October, the start of the water year, just kind of been in that normal stream flow range. Normal stream flows are declining as we come into the middle of winter. And we'll stay there till we get some runoff here in March or April and kind of continue on. So generally normal there at the upper part of the Wind River that's reporting. Next slide, please, Tony. So going over to the Green River here, below Fontenelle, seemed like flows were pretty low. Looks like well-managed system. October, November flows were pretty low, and then they bumped up here into December and January. Looking at the reservoir data, it looks like there was a decrease in the reservoir level in Fontenelle. The Bureau of Rec website said they were moving some water there, so you see that that increase in flow as waters move downstream over the last 2 months. So in that normal range, not sure how long that'll persist as, but that depending on the operation of the reservoir there. And then last site that I have here is the Snake River at Moose. It's tended to be very low since the beginning of the water year. I'm not sure quite the reason why that river has been managed that way, but they've been keeping flows quite low there. There's a little bump here in near the end of December, excuse me, and then back down to these very low flow conditions through current. Excuse me. So just looking at the reservoirs, the teacup data compared to last month, very little has changed, with the one note that there is a decrease in the storage in Fontenelle. But nearly every other reservoir was nearly the same as what it was last month, and that's kind of what you would expect with runoff not occurring, things tend to be frozen up unless there's a specific management goal going on to move water downstream. That not much has changed since we last reported and visited here in December. So with that, that's all I have. Thank you, Tony.
Thanks, Aaron. And next up, we have Tony Anderson with the National Weather Service in Cheyenne, who's going to talk about weather forecasts and outlooks.
Good afternoon, everyone, and Happy New Year. As they mentioned, my name is Tony Anderson. I'm the fairly brand new senior service hydrologist in Cheyenne. And getting into the weather, we've moved into a drier pattern of northwest flow that has put a dent in the more generous snow accumulation we saw in December and early January. We are expecting some light snow with the system passing through the state. However, it's expected to bring moisture primarily to the higher elevations, notably in the northern Laramie range, which has been shorted recently in recent months. Otherwise, the next system we expect to affect the state is likely to be a moisture-starved Arctic cold front coming through on Monday. The drier pattern of northwest flow is likely to persist through the end of the month, and there does not appear to be any game-changing snow in the near future. Go ahead. That idea is reinforced by the 6 to 10 day outlook that are showing no strong pattern for above or below normal temperatures in the state. However, the precipitation is showing us a below normal signal almost across the entire state, and that signal strengthens considerably as you move west. Go ahead. Looking out a little further to the 2 weeks, 8 to 14 days, there is very little signal in either the temperature or the precipitation outlooks. Other than a weak signal for above normal precipitation in the north central part of the state, the outlooks are pretty much forecasting it to be winter for the 7 to 14 day period. No real signal either direction for above or below normal temperatures or precipitation. Go ahead. The snow tells are showing a significant improvement over December conditions, at least in the western ranges. The upper Colorado and Snake River basins received generous snow in December, as did the Sierra Madre and Snowy ranges. These brought basin-wide snowpack estimates up to and above normal in many locations. In most of the areas, these have receded somewhat relative to the median due to the dry conditions. Conditions in the Bighorns, the Absaroka ranges, along with the Black Hills and Laramie range, were not so favorably affected by the December snowfalls. And those basins all are well below median for this time of year. Go ahead. I wanted to show 2 snow-tell stations that reflect some of what we saw over the last month. The Laramie Mountains started the season slowly and benefited greatly from the December snows, but they were not sufficient. Those snows were not sufficient to bring the area up to the median value. Further west, the snowpack was not great early in the season, but it was closer to the median, and the December snows brought them to an above normal condition. Both areas have withdrawn from their peak relative to the median as weather dried out over the last 10 days. Go ahead. Is Paul available, or am I still on?
I'm here. Can you hear me all right?
Okay, it's all you, Paul. I'll pass it off to Paul Miller from the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center.
Great, thanks so much. And Kevin, sorry that he couldn't be here to present today, but I'm going to present for the whole state of Wyoming, just on our potential flood update. In the Missouri Basin portion of Wyoming, there's low chance of any flooding. Kevin did email me to say that there's been some storms and some snowfall in the area, and that it wouldn't be out of the question for some minor flooding. during the springtime, but nothing nothing very significant or anything to be concerned about right now. But it's still pretty early in the snowpack accumulation season, so it's hard to be overly confident in this. But as of now, in the Missouri River Basin portion of Wyoming, just a little chance of some minor flooding, but that they're expecting healthy flows this year. Next slide. And then in the Colorado River Basin, where my office is located, basically the Green River Basin portion in Wyoming, our seasonal water supply forecasts are near average in a lot of places in Wyoming. Kind of the lower end towards the west is about 75% of average. But these seasonal peak flows are roughly linearly correlated with seasonal stream flow volumes. So right now, being at near average isn't overly concerning for us. We don't think there's a high flooding potential right now, but a lot can change if we got a bunch of big storms over the next couple months and maybe some significant snowpack accumulation. We could see that. But we are expecting to start releasing our peak flow forecast in the beginning of March, and we update those every 2 weeks. So you'll be able to see if we're threatening to hit any flood thresholds. But right now we're not expecting to see any flooding in the Green River portion of Wyoming. But I'd encourage everybody to check our website, especially beginning in March, cbrc.noaa.gov. Like I said, we update that every 2 weeks, and you have the most up-to-date flood risk and probabilities there. But right now, we're not expecting any flooding issues. And if you have any questions, happy to answer them.
Thanks, Paul and Tony. Well, to close us up is Wendy Kelly with the UW Extension and USDA Northern Plains Climate Hub, and she's going to talk to us about how you can get involved.
Great, thank you, Tony. So we always like to end the webinar just recapping where we are on the US Drought Monitor. So as Tony started out the webinar, he indicated that we have seen some improvements in the state, specifically in the north, central, and northwest areas, as well as the southeast compared to when we met last month. At the same time, we have had some degradations in the northeast and the central, west central parts of the state. So this is how it is appeared on the US Drought Monitor map that was released this morning. And again, this map is released each Thursday. Next slide. So there's a role for everybody here to help kind of fill in the gaps throughout the state. One program that we like to highlight is the CoCoRa's Citizen Science Program. With this program, you can report precipitation at a location, ideally on a daily basis using a standardized rain gauge that is issued. This helps to kind of fill in those gaps. As we know, precipitation fall is really variable. And so being able to capture this information is really helpful, specifically or especially the zeros. So if no precipitation was received. The map on the left that Tony's highlighting right now is showing that throughout much of the state, as of this morning, there wasn't much precipitation, but there was some areas such as in Laramie County that looks like they picked up some in a 24-hour period. And this data is pulled into tools that the National Weather Service as well as the US Drought Monitor use to help inform the information that they're putting out. Another program that I like to highlight is the Condition Monitoring Observer Report System, and you can see a bit.ly link under the report name. And this is essentially the national database where conditions can be reported. And when I say conditions, it's everything from severely dry to severely wet and in between. And this helps to kind of keep check of what's happening out on the ground and to be able to compare what's happening out on the ground, the stories that are coming in with the data that we're looking at on a weekly basis. So we do try to monitor the reports that are submitted every week, and they can be categorized by different sectors, including livestock, crops, wildlife, household, etc. I pulled the map for 2022 from the database this morning, and you can see for the state of Wyoming, we have no reports being reported for the month of January. With that, I do like to highlight a couple of things about the CMOR report system on the next slide each month. One is to talk about the value of comparison photos. So within the system, you can upload pictures, and it's really helpful to have a comparison photo uploaded. So if you send a picture in of, for example, a grazing unit and are trying to show that it is low production during a given time of year, such as July 15th, it's helpful to have a similar a picture taken from a similar location in that pasture of a more normal July 15th from a more normal year. So just like to spread that word, and if you share this resource with others, to let them know that as well. The same is true for stock water, etc. Regular reporting is really helpful. I encourage folks to try and report on, for example, the 1st of each month or the 15th of each month, so that we have that record that we can access and go back to. And then last, I do like to emphasize that reports and photos are available to the public. So whatever information you submit or your clientele submit, other people can read the impacts as well as view those photos. So that's an important note. Next slide. So with that, I want to thank all of the presenters today, as well as all of you for attending the webinar. And I do want to re-highlight a couple of the resources over on the right side of the screen, including COCORAS and the CMOR report system. But one resource I did not mention is the first one, which is the Wyoming Drought Information and Resources website. And this is where you can find links to the webinar recordings, as well as the slide decks for the webinar that we present the third Thursday of each month. So with that,